Hello and welcome back to ParticularPixels. I'm Shelling and this is Normandy 44 Steel Division, the latest RTS game brought to us by Eugen Systems, the creators of the Wargame series and Ruse. I played Ruse when it was released many years ago, and I played the first of the Wargame series, European Escalation I believe it was called, but unfortunately I didn't get around to playing the later Wargame titles. Now Normandy 44 appears to be a mix of Ruse and their Wargame games. It's a little easier I think for new players to learn because European Escalation, for me at least, was quite steep learning curve. But Normandy 44 seems to be a more casual, if you will. But that's not to say that it's as easy as a traditional RTS game to learn to play. There is still definitely somewhat of a learning curve here that you'll have to be able to deal with before I think getting the most out of this particular game. The first thing you'll need to do is create a battle group from one of the various divisions that is available in the game, either from the Axis or the Allies. There are a number of different divisions to choose from. I'm not so familiar with the divisions and history from World War II, but there are, I believe, about 9 or 10 in each of the categories. Each one has strengths and weaknesses. The game is divided into 3 phases, A, B, and C. And each of these divisions is going to have strengths. So some are going to be stronger in phase C, some are going to be stronger in phase A or B. So depending on what strategy you are planning to use, or perhaps what map you're playing, you are going to want to select a specific division in order to build up your battle deck from. From a selection of available units, you'll start to add units from the various categories, for example, recon, infantry, tanks, anti-air, artillery, and air support. So depending on the division that you choose, each of these categories are going to have a certain amount of slots that can be filled with these units. So for example, if you have an infantry focused division, you will have more available infantry slots and maybe very few tank slots. Also, clicking on each of these cards is going to give you a detailed description of the unit type, as well as a nice little image you can rotate around to have a look at the unit, the resource cost in order to call the unit onto the battlefield, and how many times it can be used in the match, as well as what phase the unit can be brought into the game. Once you've created the battle group that fits your playstyle, you'll get to save it so you can just select it from a list whenever you decide you want to use it. You can of course create multiple battle groups from various different divisions that you can choose depending, again as I said before, on the enemies that you're facing or on the map that you are playing, because the maps do quite vary in their layouts and some units are going to be better suited for certain maps, I would believe. When creating a battle group in the game, if you are unfamiliar with the units and you just rather want to hop straight into a match, you can choose a sort of a default loadout, I suppose, and select autofill, and then the game will just take units from the division you've selected and fill out your battle group for you. So you don't have to spend time doing that and you can just hop straight into a match. In Skirmish or multiplayer, you are going to be able to pick any battle group depending on the side that you're playing. However, in the campaign, you're going to be limited to a specific division that's suited for that particular mission, but you will still be able to customize your group from that particular division. However, as I said before, in Skirmish and multiplayer, you are going to be able to choose depending on your Axis or Allies. There are 12 campaign missions in Normandy 44 that are divided into 3 sections. So the first set of 4 campaign missions is going to be set on medium difficulty, the second on hard, and the final 4 missions will be on very hard. There is unfortunately no way to change the difficulties of these missions. The campaign missions themselves aren't too bad, but as you would expect, they have very specific primary goals and secondary goals and bonus objectives that you have to meet, as well as imposed time limits. These time limits that are enforced in the campaign missions will cause you to have to replay missions in order to complete them, because in some of the missions, unless you know about these already, you will probably not be prepared in order to make those goals in time. The other thing I want to say is that going straight from the tutorial into the campaign is a little bit overwhelming. The tutorial does explain the basics of the game, but there are aspects of the game that the tutorial doesn't cover in depth enough. And I found myself still having to watch some YouTube videos and guides on how to learn the game better. You're suddenly on a larger map with more units to command, and of course these time-related goals that you have to finish. And again, in subsequent missions, you have to create battle groups with little to no knowledge of what's best suited for the particular mission you're about to go on. So things like these will again force you to replay the missions to learn exactly what works and what doesn't. I did personally end up playing the AI skirmish modes to get a better feel for the game before going back to the campaign, starting on obviously very easy, then easier, then medium mode, in order to learn the game a little bit better outside of the tutorials. Now, skirmish and multiplayer modes have also a number of options to choose from in this game, and I think that the skirmish and multiplayer modes are really going to be the meat of what Normandy 44 is. I think that if you come into a game wanting a single player experience, you are probably going to be a little bit disappointed with what this game has to offer. You need to go into this game knowing that this game is focused on multiplayer or comp stomping the AI with friends or single player versus the AI. So there are a number of modes in the game, 1 versus 1, 2 versus 2, 3 versus 3, or 4 versus 4. There are 12 maps in the game at the moment, all which require different strategies. Since the landscapes of the maps are quite diverse, some are very open and others have very many buildings or forests and things like that. So you get to choose Axis versus Allies, or Allies versus Allies, or Axis versus Axis, and finally whether the game mode itself is Conquest or Destruction. The Conquest game mode is based on map control, so when you own more than 50% of the map, which is indicated by a little borderline that you can see on the map, you'll start getting points, and the higher the percent above 50, the more points you get per tick. The first team to reach the score limit, which of course can be set in the settings options, or has the highest score by the time the map timer runs out, wins the match. Destruction mode awards points for units killed, so units will reward points equal to the amount of points they cost to summon. Again, the first team to reach the score limit wins the match, or the team that has the highest score when the timer runs out wins. So when the match starts, each team gets to place down their units in the deploy area and also issue orders. Resources are given to you at intervals, so you can summon more units as the game progresses. I mentioned earlier that the game has 3 phases. Certain units have to be summoned, or at least certain units can only be summoned in certain phases, and the units are labeled A, B, and C. Early, mid, and late game respectively. Late game units cost more but are also more powerful. Different divisions, as I again alluded to earlier, are weak or stronger in different phases of the game. So of course armored divisions will have stronger tanks, for example, and will be a force to reckon with when phase C comes, and the most powerful tanks in the game are placed on the board. Whereas infantry focused divisions will do pretty well in the early game and have very good infantry, or a lot of infantry. Obviously your battle group composition will govern how you play these particular divisions within themselves. There are also 2 types of cover in Normandy, hard cover and soft cover. Buildings and forests offer hard cover and can completely conceal your units. Soft cover not so much, but cover is better than no cover at all, I suppose. Running your units out in the open is a sure way to lose them. Forest and buildings also block line of sight, which is a very, very important mechanic in Normandy, and also tank movement. So positioning your troops to take advantage of choke points and places where you get the best line of sight are very, very important. Now, unlike most RTS games, units in Normandy don't actually have health bars. Infantry have a certain amount of men within each group. Tanks have crew, and when units get shot at, they get stressed, which is indicated by a little red bar that fills up above them, and when the bar is full, they are considered pinned, which makes them unable to do anything at all, or they will automatically fall back. The other downside of units that are having high stress under fire is that their stats will suffer for it. Tanks have weaker armor on the sides and on the rear. Anti-tank weapons and bazooka teams of course will wreak havoc in forest if placed correctly. Artillery and light machine gun teams will completely break infantry units that are trying to assault your position and cause them to get pinned or fall back. And again, mortar enemies or howitzers and things like that can be used to shell enemy teams and cause them to fall back and to be pinned, and also fire smoke in order to break line of sights. There are scouts in the game as well, which you'll be sending around the map. Each unit can be made to only fire when fired upon. You can even turn off certain weapons in each unit's composition, so they only use certain weapons. For example, you have submachine gun crews, and they have rifles, some of them as well. If you disable the rifles, they'll make sure to be close enough to engage with their submachine guns. And they're very good obviously for building combat and close quarters combat. And on top of all of this, units have limited ammo supplies as well, which require you to deploy resource jeeps and trucks to refill your troops, which have a radius around them and will refill any unit in that vicinity. I will say it's taken me numerous games to come to grips and come to terms with the game mechanics in this particular game. But once you get comfortable with the way mechanics work, the game is actually very, very enjoyable. Normally it's completely different to any traditional RTS game. If you've come from the Wargame series though, I think you'll probably be in familiar territory. However, I have seen some complaints on the Steam forums from Wargame veterans that Normady seems to be an easy version or a casual version of the Wargame games, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing for someone like me. I'm not hardcore into the Wargame games. And so this was nice to be able to play that kind of game, but without the extremely high learning curve that game has. Creating battle groups, trying out different divisions and different group compositions within those divisions, I think is interesting and enjoyable. Get to learn a little bit about history as well. The combat, I think, is pretty in-depth and rewarding when you get used to it. Normandy 44 really manages to create a sense of being in a real battle with actual scale. There is a learning curve here for sure, but if you're willing to put the time in, I think there is a lot of fun. Maybe watch a few YouTube videos, go through the tutorial, read some tips and tricks, and I think that you'll get more enjoyment out of the game that way. Normally I enjoy RTS campaigns more than playing skirmishes and things like that, but I found that in this game I enjoy the skirmishes more. The campaign is tough, and the timed sections and scripted appearance of side objectives and bonus objectives required me to play a very specific way, and I think that's going to be fine when I understand the game more in depth. But as it stands at the moment, when I'm still learning the game, I'm enjoying much more playing skirmishes, and I don't think that this kind of campaign is going to be everyone's taste. And I did say earlier, if you're going to buy this game for the single campaign, I think you are going to be disappointed because there's just really not a lot of content. The missions are going to take a while to do. So yes, time-wise, you'll probably get a good few hours out of the campaign, but that's because you're going to have to keep replaying the campaign over and over. And the campaigns don't play out any differently. The enemies are always going to be coming from the same places, so there's no real dynamic there. Once you've learned how to do it and what units to use and what works, that's going to work every time. And as I mentioned earlier also, that you can't change the difficulty of the campaign either or harder. To me, Normally shines when playing multiplayer or skirmish mode, where you're free to create the battle group that you want and take things at your own pace and play the way you want to play. Normandy 44 Steel Division is a good game, and I'd recommend it to anyone who's interested in playing an RTS game with a different approach. A little strange thing though is that there are no air units that allow you to drop paratroopers onto the battlefield or behind enemy lines like it was possible in Ruse. So, DLC maybe? Guess we'll see. Anyway guys, that has been a look at Normandy 44 Steel Division. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the section below as usual. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I've been Xiaoling. Until next time.